Hey friends, I hope you are having a fantastic Thanksgiving break. And I'm continuing with my series on open source graphic design tools and photo manipulation tools and three-dimensional tools. But we continue with Inkscape. And this week I want to talk about a very interesting and useful set of tools called Align and Distribute. And I also want to talk about grouping. So let's go into Inkscape and check out those features. So here we are in Inkscape, and I have put some things on the canvas for us to work with. But if you have watched my other videos, most of these things should make sense how they were made. For example, you can tell that these are rectangles. If I click on one, it tells me it's a rectangle as opposed to a path. And of course, I use the rectangle tool in order to make that. This is something that we haven't really talked about, but I'm going to talk about in this video. This is a group of objects. And I'm going to hit Control U in order to ungroup these objects so that you can see that it's a circle and a circle and a circle. And if I make an arrangement and I don't want anything to happen to it because I took some time in order to arrange it, you can use group in order to protect the positional relationship between those objects. So for example, if I take this circle and put it up here, and take this circle and put it right here, I can then select those three objects, and I can hit Control G on my keyboard, and that groups these objects. So now when I click it or rotate it, I'm controlling those three objects as one object, one grouped set of objects. So as I move it around, I don't have to worry about it disturbing the relationship between those objects. If I click on the stars, we can see here that that is a group of three objects. I'll hit Control U on my keyboard in order to disconnect those. You can see that now they are individual objects that I can move in relationship to one another, and I can resize them in relationship to one another. And then if I'm happy with that arrangement, very common in graphic design, you don't want to lose that arrangement. So I'll select them all and hit Control G on my keyboard, which now makes this a group similar to the circles. It is more obvious that these are three separate objects comparative to this because these have three different colors and this just has one. And that's a little bit of a trick that you can do in graphic design. When several objects all have the same color, they tend to appear as though they're one object. Whereas if you have differential contrasting colors, you'll have some depth that appears between those objects. And here, these are 3D cubes created with the 3D Cube tool, which I will show you. It's right here, the 3D box tool. When I click on that and I click and drag, it creates a 3D style box. If you are familiar with tools like Blender or SketchUp, that is a wildly different thing than what you can do with this. Basically, you can change the perspective of this box, but that is it. And so before you get excited about thinking that Inkscape is also a three-dimensional modeling tool, it's not. But it does have this cool tool where you can create a 3D box. So now we have these 16 squares, and I'm going to take them a little bit out of order just to demonstrate the first aspect of Align and Distribute that we want to talk about. So you can see that these are all 16 individual objects. In other words, when I click one of them, a group is not selected. These are individual pieces. And if I select all of them like so that we have 16 objects selected, I'm going to now open the Align and Distribute dialog. You can find it right here. We're going to talk about Align in a second, but first I want to talk about Grid. So you can see that because I have these 16 objects selected, it suggests a number of rows and columns in order to create a grid out of these objects. Very, very useful. If I click on Arrange, you can see that the disarray that I introduced to each of these individual objects is gone. These items are now all in a 4x4 grid with even spacing in between each object. If I wanted to, I could make it 3 rows and 6 columns. And if I click on Arrange, you can see that it changes the order of things, but still keeps it orderly. So I'm going to change this back to 4x4 and click on Arrange. And I'm going to go to Align. There are many things that you can do in this dialog under Align. For example, alignment handles with third click. What that means is that if you have something selected and you click it twice, it will change those handles to allow for a different kind of manipulation. If you click it a third time, it offers this relatively new set of handles in Inkscape that are alignment oriented. So for example, if I wanted to take all of these objects and align them upward, I could click on this bottom handle, and you can see that it collapsed all of those boxes, all of those rectangles, into a single line. I'm going to undo, and I'm going to now click on the Align to the Right button, and you can see that they are now all in this line. So even though it appears that there are only 4 objects, I can show you that all of those 4 are just stacked on top of one another. So I'll space them all out again, and I'm going to select them all and go back to Grid and arrange them in a grid. And if I go back to the Align tab, you can see that there are all these icons down here, and there's a question here. It says relative to selection area, but you could also choose last selected, first selected, biggest object, smallest object, page, drawing, etc. I'm going to choose selection area because it's relatively easy to understand and it applies to what we're working with here. If I wanted to, I could click on this icon to align right edges of objects to the left edge of the anchor. If I do that, you can see that everything moved over this way. I'll undo that. If I click on Center on Vertical Axis, you can see that they are all compressed to the center. Here's Align Right Edges. Here's Align Left Edges of Objects to the right edge of anchor. You can see that this says Align Text Anchors horizontally. That only applies in the case where we are using text. We are not using text right now, so that's not going to do anything. But you can also align top edges, align bottom edges, etc. Let's say that I just wanted to work with these 4. If I want to, I can move this outward, move this outward, move this outward. And I can select all of those. So with those selected, here I am under Align. Because I just manually moved these are not exactly in line with each other. And so if I wanted to, I could click on Center on Horizontal Axis. And you can see that all of those rectangles now are aligned on the center line. You can also see that there is this distribute set of functions down here, where, for example, I can distribute horizontally with even spacing between left edges. So if I click on that, you can see that now those 4 boxes, those 4 rectangles, are evenly spaced. I could do the same thing with the center or the right. I could also distribute horizontally with even horizontal gaps. So for example, if I take these shapes and give them some odd spacing, I'll select all of them and I will choose distribute horizontally with even horizontal gaps. And you can see that those all have even spacing. Now, it's because I have these four selected and changed the distance between the first and the fourth object that these are not aligned with the rectangles above, and those are not aligned with the rectangles above. If I wanted to fix that, I could then select all of these objects, go into grid, and choose a range for 4 by 4. And now you can see that because my first object and my fourth object in line was wider than the previous grid, it has used the edges of those first and fourth objects in order to define the size of the grid. So if I was to take, let's say, all of these and move them inward, and take all of these and move them inward, and then select all 16 and choose a range, you can see that they're evenly spaced, but the size of the grid is based on where I placed my first set of blocks and where I set my last set of blocks. Let's go back into a line. Let's say that I wanted to have disorder as opposed to order. Inkscape can allow for that too. So for example, I can use this function, randomize centers in both dimensions, and you can see that it's taken my grid of rectangles and overlap them and close them together and randomly arrange them. And now if I go back to grid and I click on arrange, it resets that random placement of those objects. You will notice that I have several colors represented here in this set of 16 objects. If I want to, I can change the selection order just by clicking on this icon. And again, it's rotating the objects, which of course is rotating the colors. If I use this function here, exchange positions of selected objects, rotate around center point, you can see that it's doing something very similar. Now, if I click on the randomize centers in both directions in order to create that chaos again, and then I click on this next icon, unclump objects, try to equalize edge-to-edge distances, you can see that these objects start to move apart and try not to overlap. So there's a lot of things that you can do with grouping and ungrouping, a lot of things that you can do within a line and distribute, and the rearrange tools and the grid tools. There's just a lot of different tools that you can use in order to arrange objects on your page. I hope this has been incredibly helpful for you. I hope that if you are using Inkscape and you come across something you'd like to talk about, that you think of me and either leave me a message, send me an email, call me, whatever you want to do. I do hope that you are having a lovely Thanksgiving. I hope you are having peace during your break. And thank you very much for spending some time with me. Bye.